lot of data just because I don't have a whole lot of data. So I prefer apps which are lighter weight anyway. And really, that's a better policy, is to use apps which are as lightweight as possible, especially on data, because just in case, plans are weird. Phone plans, especially, are really just bizarre. They're terrible usually. But Feedly tends to not use a whole lot of data. It doesn't have a whole bunch of images popping up at you and causing problems. So that's one of the nice things about it. Flipboard is mostly the same. It does use a lot more processing power. So if you use Flipboard instead of Feedly, your battery's going to die faster. So that's something to keep in mind. But other than that, if you don't care about battery life as much, go with Flipboard. If you care about battery life more and you don't want, but that's those are my choices anyway. I tend to use Feedly over Flipboard, but that's just me. Those are the best ways to get the news, I think, because you can also subscribe to local news stations. So you could subscribe to the Hot News Talk Radio Twitter feed on Flipboard. You could also subscribe to different local stations. You could subscribe to the paper if you wanted. You could subscribe to, say, different local TV news stations. You could subscribe to even TV stations where you used to live. So you used to live in Jacksonville, Florida, and you want to keep up on the news there. All you have to do is add Jacksonville's TV news station, whichever one it may be, to your particular Feedly account or Flip. Well, basically, it takes all the different news sites you go to and puts it in one place, which is incredibly useful. You'd be surprised how useful that actually is. Because if you're like me and you like to keep updated on the news, chances are you're going from one place to another, to another, to another. And that gets really tedious sometimes, especially if you're looking at tech news sites where you're jumping from one to the other really quickly. It's easier to just have them all in one space where you can just log on and look at it, and it's right there. In fact, Feedly on the mobile app has its own browser, so you don't have to worry about launching Firefox or Chrome or Safari over and over and over and over again, which is really nice. Hey, bad news for you, by the way. If you're using Firefox OS, if you're one of the very few people who are running Firefox OS, the problem is Firefox OS is kind of being phased out. So if you were using it before, you can't anymore. The thing, though, is that Firefox on the app is still being supported just fine. So if you use Firefox on your phone like I do, then you're not going to have any problems. I use Firefox on my desktop and I use it on my phone, and I've had no problems with it. Now, let's be honest about web browsers, okay? It doesn't make a whole lot of difference which web browser you use, generally speaking. Now, there are some very good arguments against Chrome, though, and I'll give them to you in a nutshell. Chrome, the web browser, is, of course, a Google web browser. And as such, it tends to log everything you do, possibly including passwords. So if you don't want Google knowing what your passwords are and what you're searching, that can be a problem for you. So if you're more privacy minded, stay away from Chrome. There are options. You can use Chromium, which is different from Chrome. It's the same exact thing as Google Chrome, except it doesn't have the proprietary Google features in it. You can still use Google search and everything like that. It's just that it's not made and maintained by Google. It's the alternative version. Another good web browser, of course, is Opera. Opera is not used nearly as much as it used to be. It's not really used by a whole lot of people these days, but it's a web browser, it works, and it's very lightweight. So you can't really go wrong with Opera. It tends to run pretty well on older computers as well. So if you have an older machine, then Opera might be the web browser for you. Let's not even get into Internet Explorer, or Edge as it's called now, because quite frankly, it's pretty awful. I've heard that Edge is supposed to be better. It's not that great. I'll be frank with you. Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge, the new Microsoft web browser, not really that great. It's just boring. It's not a great interface. It's just kind of it's all right. I don't have any use for it. I'll stick with Firefox personally. But those are your big options. You have Google Chrome, Firefox, and Opera, and of course Internet Explorer. But if you buy a PC, let's say you bought a Windows machine, Safari, of course, if you're on a Mac. If you're on a Mac, I can't say anything bad about Safari, honestly. I don't like it that much personally, but that's my personal taste. There's nothing wrong with Safari objectively. I just tend to not like it personally. I will freely admit it's a fine browser. There's really not a whole lot wrong with Safari. It's just not my thing, right? Kind of like there's a particular movie that a lot of people like, but I don't. And that's not saying it's a bad movie. It's just I don't like it. And that's the same thing with Safari, where it's a really good browser. It's just I don't like it that much. So if you use Safari, that's totally fine. There's not really any immediate reason why you should not use Safari. It's fine. It works. It does what it's supposed to. It's fine. So I can't complain about Safari. Really, I just don't like it. If you're on a Mac, it comes with Safari already, so that's fine. If you're on Windows, you're probably being shipped with Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge, depending on if you're getting Windows 10 or not. If you're getting Windows 10, you're getting Microsoft Edge. Sorry, you're stuck with it. I wish that wasn't so, but it is. But that's okay because you could change that. Here's the thing. Microsoft has long had a thing where it ships with a web browser, which is nice because you can use that web browser to get promptly another web browser because the Microsoft ones are not very good. But here's the option you have. You can actually get Safari on Windows. It doesn't run very well. I wouldn't recommend it. Here's the thing. When you buy your first laptop or your computer, you open it up for the first time, it's probably going to have, Microsoft Windows on it, just common. And the web browser on there is going to be Internet Explorer. I've said for a long time, you should only use Internet Explorer once, and that's to download another web browser and make it your default immediately. You don't want Internet Explorer. It doesn't run very well. It's not that great. It's gotten better. You can still run it, but you're missing a lot of functionality. It's just not a very good web browser. Sorry, it's just not. Firefox is actually, technically speaking, it has a long lineage. It goes all the way back to Netscape, actually. It's really way back, all the way back to the first Mozilla web browser and then to Firefox. It's a really, technically, it has a really long lineage. It was meant to be an alternative to Internet Explorer, actually. Netscape shipped with AOL way back in the day, way back in the day. In fact, it used to be that Internet Explorer was like the only web browser you could get for a long time, and you had to pay for it. Yeah, can you imagine having to pay for a web browser? People did it, though. Back in the 90s, you had to buy Netscape on a disk. It's not like you could just get Netscape. You had to get it on a disk. If you wanted a web browser, you had to go buy it on a disk. It was weird. And fortunately, we don't live in a world where you have to do that anymore because now your operating system just straight up ships with a web browser already. If you're on a Mac, you're already using Safari and you're fine. But if you're on a Windows machine, you're using most likely Internet Explorer and you need to shift over to something else immediately. So your big options are, again, Opera, Safari, if you're on a Mac. And of course, there's, I lost my train of thought. You got Opera, you've got Google Chrome, you've got Firefox. And those are really your big options. Now, you can get more technical and we can say Pale Moon or Sea Monkey, but we'll approach that on another day. Those are your big web browsers that you're going to want to use. So let's talk about music. I really, really am into listening to music. It's one of the things that I'm just really into. I listen to a lot of music. How do I do that? Well, there are a few options. I'm really big into discovering new bands. So I tend to go to a lot of different music streaming websites to find out about new bands. Well, how can we do that? Well, there's a few options here as well. You'll notice that. Excuse me. You'll notice that there are a lot of different options when it comes to the internet and applications. There's a lot of different applications for doing basically exactly the same thing. So let's wade through them all and find out which ones are the best. Right now, most people are using Spotify. Now, Spotify is a fine platform. It's not terrible, but it's ad supported, which is understandable. And it's based on playlists. So there are a lot of different artists on Spotify. There's not really any shortage of artists on Spotify. The problem is not everyone is on there. So not everyone's going to be on Spotify. Taylor Swift wasn't on Spotify for a long time. A lot of different artists are, for some reason, boycotting Spotify. Don't know why. It's mostly a royalties thing. It's pretty silly, but a lot of different artists are actually boycotting Spotify for really, frankly, silly reasons. But that's one option. Spotify is pretty good. It plays music. It does its job. You can share playlists with people. It's very social. It's sort of a social media music app. It's very social. The other option is Pandora. Pandora is pretty dang popular, but Pandora is set up in a different sort of format. Pandora is not meant for you to just get on and listen to a specific song. That's not really the purpose of Pandora. Pandora is meant for a playlist, like you're doing something and you want to just listen to music in a particular genre. So let's say you get on Pandora and you type in rock or pop or rap or whatever. So then once you've done that, you're now listening to rock or pop or rap or whatever, not really a specific artist. You're just listening to that particular genre. Now you can actually type in the name of an artist. You can do that too. So let's say you can type in the Beatles and the Beatles will start playing, but bands similar to the Beatles will also start playing. So it's not like you're just going to listen to the Beatles or you're just going to listen to this one particular genre, and it's not like you're going to specifically pick out a song and listen to it. It doesn't really work that way. So you have to keep that in mind when we're talking about Pandora. It's a little bit different than, say, a music service where you're listening to a specific genre. The other ones are actually a little bit different. You might not think of them. You have Apple Music, actually, which is picking up some steam. If you have an iPhone and AT&T, chances are you've already gotten a free trial to Apple Music. So you might already be a little bit acquainted with the concept of Apple Music already. So what we can do with Apple Music is you can use it in conjunction with Siri. So if you have an iPhone, you can open up Siri and say, hey, Siri, play whatever. And if it's in the Apple Music library, then it will start playing that particular song. So it's a pretty cool service. I used it, and my friend used it a lot on a road trip we made up to Maryville. So it does work, and it works pretty well, but it doesn't have everything. That's the thing. It's got most of everything that's going to be in the iTunes store. So that's a lot of options, but it's not going to have absolutely everything. If you're like me, you listen to a little bit more obscure stuff, so it's not going to have everything you could ever want in there, unfortunately. I wish it did, but it doesn't always. So you have to keep that in mind. Another option that actually tends to have a lot more content, interestingly enough, is actually Google Play Music. Google Play Music is not one that's very popular in the sense of everyone knows that it's there and everyone uses it for some reason. Google Play Music is a really good service, and I think more people should use it, but it's not widely used for some odd reason. So let's run through it real quick, because I happen to have that one open right now. We'll go to Google Play Music on my Android phone. If you have an Android phone, it comes with Google Play Music already, but maybe you haven't launched it or tried it yet. So it's worth trying. So what you can do is you can actually search for specific stuff. And if you don't have it in your library, you might actually be able to play it on your it's called internet radio. You can play it on Google Play Music's music streaming service, which is really nice. So let's say I want to listen to Unlovable by the Smiths, and I can actually do that even though I don't have it in my library. I can actually go right now to radio stations that it has on Google Play Music, which are not true radio stations. It's internet radio. And all I have to do is hit play on this particular one. And what do you know? It actually starts playing the particular song, and I don't have to pay for it. That's the fun thing. Now, granted, it does have ads, and you can skip them, but you can subscribe to get all the stuff, without having to watch ads, and you can watch specific songs and all that sort of thing, and it's quite nice. But this is just fine for the short term. It's a great service. And another fun thing about it is you can actually listen to specific genres as well. So let's say you want to listen to Christmas music. There are actually curated playlists of Christmas music on Google Play Music. And it's just really cool. So if you're looking for a music service that's a little bit different from what you might be used to, but still functions really well, and it's maintained by Google, you can't really go wrong with Google Play Music. It's something that I've been using for about a year now, I'm wanting to say, and I've had no problems with it whatsoever. I really like it a lot. So Google Play Music is one of your better options, actually, for listening to music on your smartphone, especially if it's an Android phone. Well, we're brought to you by Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. There's a total store sale going on now, and you need it now, not after Christmas. 50, 60, and 70% off on designer jewelry and gifts. Also get cash when you sell gold, silver, bracelets, rings, diamonds, jewelry. Rick Davis will pay you cash personally. That's cash, cash, cash. Get some today at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Coming up next after me, we have Colin Cowherd. He's the Rush Limbaugh of sports. After him, we have Clutch with Keon Rose. more Colin Cowherd, Sean Hannity, Hot News Live at 5, more Colin Cowherd again, American Now with Megan McCain, Ground Zero, and Coast to Coast AM with George Noory from 1 to 6 a.m., all right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. There's a lot of different ways to listen to us, actually. You can go on the TuneIn radio app on your smartphone, and you can listen to us streaming live on TuneIn. So all you have to do is go to your particular app store. You can be on Android or you can be on your iPhone, and open up that app store and then search for Hot News Talk Radio, search for the TuneIn radio app, I should say. I wish we had an app, but we don't. Go to the Play Store or your particular app store, and then go to the search bar. And then all you have to do is search for TuneIn Radio, and you'll find it there. Hit install. Okay, it's going to take maybe a minute or so. Hit install, and then open it up and search for Hot News Talk Radio on the TuneIn Radio app, and you'll be able to listen to us streaming live here at Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240, and we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com as well. So we're going to bring you more news coming up in a few minutes, and also we're going to be talking about more apps and such. But I want to say just for a little bit that I've been buying a lot of movie tickets, actually. I was wanting to watch The Big Short this weekend because it's coming out on, I think, Friday. And I was thinking about how can I share my ticket buying experience with different people on the air? How can I do that? Well, there are actually a few different apps you can use to buy tickets. The one that I recommend the most is Fandango, not because I'm being paid by Fandango, but actually because it's the most widely adopted ticket buying service, and it's the one that's most used by different movie theaters. In fact, a lot of movie theaters will actually have Fandango booths where you can actually log in and buy your ticket or redeem your ticket there and skip the line entirely. And it's really nice. And that's a great way to save yourself some time, especially at a movie premiere where everyone's lined up. You can just go to the Fandango booth, redeem your ticket there, and you're in. You're golden. And it's really, really nice. That's one of the best ways to get yourself a movie ticket is through Fandango instead of bothering with the whole buying it at the booth experience. Not very nice. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio. Stay tuned.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Lay your burdens down at the woodhouse. Leave all your worries at the door. Just take some time. We're transforming life.
Happy holidays at the Wood. From the Woodhouse Day Spa. Holiday gift cards available at chattanooga.woodhousespas.com.
We live in uncertain times. From extreme weather and natural disasters to civil unrest. Don't panic. Be prepared. With protective gear and medical supplies, tactical and camping equipment, long-term food storage and water purification, ammunition and knives, alternative power solutions and lighting, P5 Preparedness has the products and training classes to help you through life's catastrophic events. P5 Preparedness at East Brainerd and Panorama Drive.
If you have an event coming up for the holidays, or maybe it is your daughter's wedding, or maybe just a church or office party, then you need to select Choo Choo Barbecue. That's correct, Choo Choo Barbecue. Whether you like pork, chicken, or beef, oh yes, Choo Choo Barbecue with their savory rub flavor. Oh my goodness, it's making me hungry right now. You add in their delicious smoked aroma, and you have set the table for a perfect meal with Choo Choo Barbecue. That's right, Choo Choo Barbecue. Why don't you give them a call right now? 423-843-9554. That's 843-9554. Call 423-843-9554. Choo Choo Barbecue. You know where it's located, off of Hickson Pike, right there at the Valley Brook area. Don't kid yourself. Your stomach is already on the way.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures, get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Saudi Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead. 622-3156. Tax-free investing, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. Edward Jones financial advisor Patrick Neal. Patrick will be giving a seminar December 10 at 6 o'clock and offering free barbecue dinner. His topic will be tax-free investing. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. We'll be talking about strategies in reducing your tax burden and in buying municipal bonds. Call 870-7894. That's 870-7894. Edward Jones and your host will be Patrick Neal, making sense of investing.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
In Chattanooga, there's about a 40% chance of rain right now, actually. And it sure looks like it. Just looking out the window, I can see some pretty gray storm clouds looming overhead. Oddly enough, though, I can see the blue sky on the horizon, so who knows. But we are expecting a little bit of rain today. Keep that in mind. And our weekend is looking to be pretty rainy as well, which I don't mind because I think rainy weather is much better than clear, boring weather. I like rainy weather much, much better than I like clear, nice weather. Summer's not my thing, in case you couldn't tell. I really don't like summer, actually. I liked it when I was in school, but I'm not anymore. I haven't been for quite a long time, so I prefer winter, actually, but that's just me. This is just now coming in. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has announced the arrest of the Ringgold City Clerk of Court, Tracy Allen Bass. The 52-year-old from Fort Oglethorpe is now facing charges of theft by taking, computer forgery, tampering with evidence, and interfering with a government property. The Ringgold police told the Catoosa County District Attorney that he requested the investigation last week over missing court fees and fines from the office. He was arrested on Tuesday and then released on bond. The investigation is still ongoing, so he's not been convicted of any crime. That has to be kept in mind. But he has been arrested on these charges, which are theft by taking, computer forgery, tampering with evidence, and interference with government property. So the Ringgold police has requested the investigation. And this is just now coming in, and there aren't a whole lot of details on this yet, but we'll keep you updated, and be sure to listen at 5, where we'll give you more details on that right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240, and we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com as well, and we're on the TuneIn Radio app, where you can listen live there as well. Get TuneIn on your smartphone, and you can listen to us streaming live anywhere in the world. Actually, if you have a radio on your car, which has Bluetooth enabled, and you happen to be out of our AM range, you can actually connect your phone with Bluetooth to your radio and have the TuneIn Radio app going, and you can actually listen to us in your car just like you're here in the studio with us. It's actually using the same feed that goes to our transmitter site, so it's just as good as what we put out of the air. It's really nice sounding. So you can check that out, Hot News Talk Radio on the TuneIn Radio app, and listen to us streaming live there on Hot News Talk Radio. Also, you can get us on Twitter. Go to Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, where you report the world decides. It's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, so be sure to check that out on the Twitterverse, as the media has for some reason taken to calling it. So we were talking about sort of just the basics of computing, what you should do when you first get your computer, and we have a few recommendations for you. If you have any questions, call in at 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 at Hot News Talk Radio. So 423-800-8949 if you have any questions, comments, or you'd like to share an app with us here at Hot News Talk Radio. So what do you do when you first get your computer? Let's assume you've first gotten your Windows computer and you just plugged it in, you booted it up, and you're looking at the start menu, and what do you do? Well, the first thing is, chances are you've got either Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge, the new Microsoft web browser, neither of which are particularly good. So you're going to want to get something else. What should you get? Well, you have Firefox, you have Opera, and you have Google Chrome. I wouldn't recommend Chrome personally. You can get Chromium, which is a little bit different. That's fine, but I don't recommend Chrome personally. Either Firefox or Opera are both really good browsers. I use Firefox personally, so you can use that or you can use Opera. It's up to you, really. Web browsers tend to be sort of a matter of personal taste, personal preference. So it's kind of up to you what you want to get. Personally, again, I prefer Firefox because that's my personal preference. It's kind of like Blade Runner is my favorite movie, but The Rock might be yours for some reason. It's a matter of taste. Both are objectively fine movies. It's just that subjectively you're going to prefer one over the other, or not like one at all over another, and that's just how it is. That's just life. So web browsers tend to be that way too. And operating systems too, honestly. Whether you like a Mac or a PC, we like to break it down and say, well, this is better than this, that's better than that. Really, it's mostly about personal taste, because you can have functions which you're never going to use. And maybe a Windows machine will have these functions which you're never going to use. And the more techie among us will say, you need to get a Windows machine because you can use these features which you're probably never going to use. Like, I would say Windows machines are great because you can run a bunch of games. And if you're not going to run games, there's not really a whole lot of reason. Let's be frank. If you're going to use your computer for web browsing exclusively, right, it doesn't really matter what operating system you get. If you get Mac OS or if you get Windows, it doesn't actually matter that much, because it's just web browser. Web browsers are pretty much universal across platforms. I use Firefox on my computer at work, which is an Ubuntu machine, and I use Firefox on my computer at my house, which is a Windows machine. And the difference is negligible. There's almost none. So it doesn't really matter. And if we're talking about, say, word processing for college, you're probably going to be using Microsoft Word or OpenOffice or LibreOffice, which again run the same across platforms. So it doesn't really matter. Funnily enough, unless you're an enthusiast, of course, it doesn't really matter which platform you get. And it pains me to say that, because I'm really stingy about these sorts of things. I'm really, really anal about, can I say that? I'm really uptight about which web browser or which operating system I use. Like, I really hate Mac OS because it's way too simplified for me. I'm more of an enthusiast than Mac OS will allow me to be. But if you like Mac OS and you're not a computer enthusiast, you're just a casual user, Mac OS is fine. And it pains me to say that, but that's the case. Same goes for phones. If you're more of an enthusiast, you're probably going to want Android over an iPhone. But there's not a whole lot of difference between Androids and iPhones when it comes right down to it. There are some, but in terms of the main functions of running apps and making phone calls and making texts, there's not a whole lot of difference. And again, it pains me to say that, but that kind of actually tends to be the case with a lot of these things. It's just up to your personal preference. Which would you rather have? Do you want an iPhone or do you want an Android? It's up to you. How much money do you want to spend is probably the best question in terms of that. How much money would you like to spend? Because that's going to be the main question when it comes to buying an iPhone or buying an Android. If you're off plan, an Android is going to be your better option for price. If you're on plan, it doesn't really matter because there's going to be deals for either one. It's just personal preference again. So there's a lot that has to do with personal preference when we're talking about computers, because there are apps which are tailor-made for different purposes, right? There are apps which are tailor-made for specific purposes and they function almost the same. It's just up to you which one you like better. Okay, case in point, media players. There's a bunch of different media players, especially for Windows and Mac, and there's even more for Linux, but we don't need to get into that. There's a bunch of different movie players and audiophile players, and my gosh, there are so many. So the most common one that most people are going to be using is VLC. Most people who install a media player that's not, Windows media player are going to install VLC. There's not really anything wrong with VLC. There are some things that I don't like about it, but that's just me. Like, looking at it straight on, it's a perfectly fine media player. You can't go wrong with VLC. It's simple. It just works. It's fine. VLC is not bad. There are some little, enthusiast things, again, that I don't like about it, but that's just me. And admittedly, I use VLC most of the time when watching movies and watching videos and audio files and all these different things. I mostly use VLC. So if you're going to use a web browser or a media player on your computer that's not Windows Media Player and it's not iTunes or QuickTime, then VLC really is a good option. And on Macs especially, QuickTime sometimes takes a while to load. And iTunes will take a long time to open. If you're wanting to just listen to an MP3 file, like you just want to listen to an MP3, VLC is fine for that. So I would recommend downloading VLC. You can download it from, it's a website, Videolan. So do a quick web search for VLC Media Player, and your first option might be CNET or download.com. I wouldn't use those. Go straight to the source, which will probably download from either SourceForge or GitHub. I'm not sure which. It's up to you. So you can get VLC, which is a really good media player. There are other options as well. There's MPlayer. There's Media Player Classic MPC. Or rather, there's Media Player Classic Home something. MPC-HC is another option. MPV is sort of an up-and-comer, actually. MPV, I've had no problems with at all. It's really lightweight. So if you're running an older machine, MPV might be a good option for you. It's MPV. That works on Mac, it works on Windows, and it works on Linux especially well. So MPV is a really good media player for you. And I've had zero problems with MPV in the past. I think it's a really good video player. It might be a little bit more advanced than you might like. Again, up to you. So VLC, MPC, and MPV, I know lots of acronyms, are really good web browsers, really good video players and audio players too, because MPV will play MP3 files just fine, and waves and MIDI and everything else you could want. VLC's claim to fame really is that it'll play pretty much any audio and video format you throw at it. It seriously has a lot of capability that way. Like a lot of, actually on Linux, you can't play MP3 by default. You have to download some extra stuff first. So it's a really good player for that. On Windows, you might not be able to play certain video files without downloading codecs, which gets to be really complicated and really annoying. So just download VLC if you're having problems with that. Chances are, if you're trying to watch a video file and it won't play, VLC is a good option for you. It's good for watching DVDs too, because it will play DVDs just fine. When you open it up, it'll ask you if you want to make it your default video player. Just hit yes if you want to, and most video and audio files will then be associated with VLC. I have no problems with VLC. It opens in a snap. It's really nice. VLC is good. I can't really say anything bad about it. It's just a really good video player, and they're making some updates to it pretty soon, like soonish. There are going to be some changes made to VLC as well, which could be really nice. And actually, interestingly enough, oddly enough, VLC is actually working on a video editing program, which I'm really excited about. I no idea what it's going to be like, but I'm really excited about just trying it out, because hopefully it'll be free and open source, and then I'll be able to use it with no limitations. So that'll be really nice, and I'm really looking forward to that. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. You know, we're everywhere. You can listen live to Hot News Talk Radio over at hotnewstalkradio.com. Check us out on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone. That's TuneIn on your smartphone, and then search for Hot News Talk Radio. You can also get us on the website, hotnewstalkradio.com. You can also get us on the Hot News Cam, only at Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube. Just go to Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube, and then you can watch us streaming live there as well. And most of our shows are actually streaming live on YouTube, so you can watch video of us here in the office and listen to your favorite radio shows right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240, and we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com as well. Don't forget to get us on Twitter as well. We're on Twitter. Just search for Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, where you report the world decides. You can see us, all of our different tweets there on Twitter. We tweet a lot about the news and such there on Twitter. Speaking of the news, we do have some breaking-ish news coming in from Ringgold, Catoosa County specifically. The Ringgold City Clerk of Court, Tracy Allen Bass, has been arrested. The 52-year-old Fort Oglethorpe man is now facing charges of theft by taking, computer forgery, tampering with evidence, and interference with government property. Ringgold Police told the Catoosa County District Attorney, the District Attorney told the Ringgold Police that he requested an investigation last week over missing court files and fines from the office. He has been arrested on Tuesday and released on bond. The investigation is presently ongoing. And again, I have to note that he's not been convicted of any crime. So we have to be fair in reporting. He's not been convicted of any crime. He's been arrested, and these suspicions could be totally thrown out the window next week. So we don't know. And I like to be really cautious about that, because giving the news is sort of a tightrope walk, because you have to be really careful about saying potentially libelous things, meaning that rape cases especially are very sensitive. So let's say that someone has been accused of a very heinous crime. We'll just put it in those terms. Someone's been accused of a very heinous crime, and a news organization reports this man is accused of this heinous crime, and his name's all over the place, right? And this particular news organization doesn't really describe him as a defendant, constantly refers to him by his name, whatever. And it turns out that he's not guilty, or he's not found guilty in a court of law. So he's free to go. But now his name, even though he's not been convicted and is innocent, found innocent in a court of law, he's found not guilty, his name is all over the place in the news. So this can be rather smearing. And this can be make it really hard to find a job. If you're accused of something, even if you're found not guilty, this can make it very hard for you to find a job anywhere, really. Especially any job that has any sort of prominence, banking, or anything that's going to be higher paid. You're going to run into some troubles if you don't have good connections, and that can cause you to run into quite a few problems. So I like to be as careful as possible when approaching those sorts of situations, because we don't know. We don't know the whole story, especially in stories of, say, government corruption or particularly heinous crimes. It's in poor taste to spread around someone's name like that, and then it turns out they're not guilty. We just don't know. So you have to be fair in reporting on these things, even if you, the reporter, you feel that this guy is, he definitely did it. He's totally guilty. Even so, you have to set these things aside in the name of good reporting. So it's hard to do. It's sort of a tightrope walk, but these are the sacrifices you must make, and it's an honor to uphold, but it's also a challenge. So that's the world of news reporting in that sense, in a nutshell, I guess. Hey, speaking of staying connected, this is a weird transition. Speaking of staying connected, a lot of people don't have a LinkedIn account, and I found that this can actually help you out quite a bit. When trying to find a job, especially if you can connect with former employers and have them endorse you for a particular skill in a particular job, then having a LinkedIn account can be very useful for you if you're on the job hunt. Because chances are, when you're being interviewed by someone and you're being taken seriously for that interview, the person who's hiring you is going to look you up online. That's common for a lot of different employers. They'll look you up online. You want to make sure they find good things about you, because stuff happens. Maybe you've got priors, whatever, or you were just accused and found not guilty. Even that can look kind of bad. So having a LinkedIn account can actually help you out with that quite a bit. In fact, including a link to your LinkedIn account in an online resume couldn't hurt either. So having a LinkedIn account is a really useful thing to have, and I would definitely recommend that you get one. The thing with LinkedIn is that the interface is really confusing. It's kind of not intuitive, but again, employers tend to like it. LinkedIn accounts are useful. Lots of people have them. Carly Fiorina has a LinkedIn account. There are lots of different, very prominent people who have LinkedIn accounts. And you can see who's been viewing your LinkedIn account as well, which is pretty nice. Again, that's LinkedIn. It's all one word, linkedin.com. And just go there and you can make an account. And it's sort of a professional social networking site, I guess would be the best way to describe it. It's like Facebook, but for business people. And nobody really shares links on there. It's just for business purposes only, essentially. I'm on LinkedIn. If you look me up, you can see me. Most of the people here are on LinkedIn. You can find us there. It's just LinkedIn is what most of us use. It's good for if you're looking for a job, or if you're building credentials while at your current job. You can have different coworkers, your employer, endorse you for different skills. Like, for instance, I'm not looking for another job, right? Like, I'm not trying to leave here anytime soon. But it's good to have, because you can then build up your reputation, as it were, on LinkedIn. So I have my the people I work with have endorsed me for different skills, like telecommunications, and for broadcasting, and for news, and for reporting, and these sorts of things. So I've been endorsed by my different people I work with for these particular skills, which in the end is really useful if I'm looking for another place to work, which, as unlikely as that is, could happen. So just using that as an example, that might be something that's useful for you. And if you find your boss on LinkedIn, it might be a good idea to request, hey, can you endorse me for the stuff I do around here? Chances are he'll say yeah, because it's really not a big deal. It's easy to do. And that's just one more way to make yourself that much more marketable, because really that's what a job hunt is marketing yourself. When you're looking for a job, really what you're doing is you're marketing yourself to other people. So that's something you have to keep in mind, is think in that mindset, is you're marketing yourself to other people. And you can use technology to that end very well. There are different resume builders. In fact, Google Docs has one built in right there. You might want to customize it a little bit so it doesn't look very stock, but you can actually get a resume builder on Google Docs, and it's super easy. It's right there on the front page. You can build your resume very easily that way. It's just really nice, and it looks good. So that's one really good use of Google Docs. Something that I found actually that I use Google Docs for here at the office is I keep a lot of show notes just for different stuff I do for the news, and for this show, I'll keep show notes, which is kind of meta to talk about actually. But one way, or the way that I keep those notes handy, is I actually write them up on my desktop computer behind me in the office, and then I'll transfer that over to Google Docs. And all I have to do is open it up on my phone, and it's right there in front of me. So I can have all my notes on my phone without having to have a sheet of paper every single day. So it's actually cheaper to do that way, because paper, adds up, and ink and all these other things. And writing is hard for me to do because I never write by hand. I always type, which is kind of an odd occurrence actually. And it's just better. So Google Docs is a really good application for that. Transferring files. You can use Google Drive to transfer files from your phone to your computer, from your computer to another computer. As long as you log in, it's all right there. Google Drive is great for that. Dropbox is also really nice for that. And I think it has a 50, I'm going to say, gigabyte limit before you have to pay. So it's a really good application for sharing files across different platforms. It's just really nice. It's very universal. Google Docs is great as well for sharing PDFs actually, or for just having PDFs on hand. For instance, I have it's not really a board game, it's a tabletop game that I was going to play with my friends up in Maryville. And I didn't want to put the PDF file on my phone because I just didn't feel like plugging my phone in. So what I did was I uploaded it to Google Docs on my desktop computer, and then I just logged into my Google Docs account on my phone with the Google Docs app, actually the Google Drive app, and it was right there. And I could access it, and I could scroll through it, I could search through it. It was really nice. So it was just a great way to keep that PDF on hand without having to constantly transfer files back and forth. That's one way where the cloud is really helping us out. A lot of people are, for some reason, sort of afraid of the idea of the cloud. I don't know why. I think it's sort of a neo-Luddite sort of thing. It seems silly in retrospect, and it's going to seem silly in retrospect going forward. But right now, a lot of people are afraid of technology. I know a lot of parents who are jumping on that bandwagon of, we need to limit the time that our kids spend on the screens, and they'll limit it to like 30 minutes a day. You can't get much of anything done in 30 minutes a day. And let me tell you, I grew up in the computer age. I'll reveal that about my age. I grew up in the computer age with the internet, and YouTube and Wikipedia and all sorts of different news sources were very beneficial to my education, much more so than school books were. So limiting your child's time on the internet, while good, perhaps you shouldn't be as extreme as a lot of people tend to be. Limiting time on the internet is good, in moderation, but you have to keep in mind that that natural sense of exploration and wonder and curiosity is in the end good for a child's learning. And if your kid is smart and wants to learn more about things like I did, then there's going to be that want to look things up on the internet, that constant yearning to know more about different things. And the internet is pretty much the best resource for that. You have to think about the internet, what it is. The internet, the World Wide Web, is the largest repository of human knowledge ever. So restricting access to that in very restrictive ways seems to be kind of foolish, because that's all of the world's known knowledge right there on the web. It's all right there. If you've ever been curious about how anything has ever worked, the information is, chances are, right there on the internet. Especially if you're using a smartphone, it's always with you. You're essentially carrying in your pocket the biggest repository of knowledge ever right there. So there's no sense in restricting access to that, because it's right there. It's everywhere. You can't restrict access to it. And something I'll tell you about kids is even if you do set rules and say you can only use the computer at these particular times, they're going to use the computer a lot more than that. Trust me. If your kid is anything like mine was, we'll find ways. We always do. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. Get us on the TuneIn radio app for your smartphone. That's Hot News Talk Radio on TuneIn. You can listen to us anywhere in the world on your smartphone that way. So it's a great way to keep in touch with us here. Be sure to get us on Twitter. Colin Cowherd is up next right here, Hot News Talk Radio.